Hi, welcome to my video on factoring the sum of two squares. The sum of two squares. The previous video was the difference of two squares. Now we're going to do factoring the sum of two squares. Factoring the sum of two squares. A squared plus b squared is the sum of two squares where a and b are integers. We're only factoring over the set of integers. We're not using fractions. I did do one section on taking out a rational number, which is leading coefficient, but that's rare. But it will be useful in the math, but it's not. In factoring, most times you won't see a fraction. Most times. So notice this one is x squared plus 9. That's the difference of two squares. Notice we have x squared plus 4. That's the sum of two squares. So that's an x squared plus 3 squared. It's the sum of two squares. That's x squared plus 2 squared. That's the sum of two squares. That's x being squared, 3 being squared with a plus. And this one right here, 16x squared is a 4x squared plus 5y squared. So notice that 16x squared is 4x squared, 25y squared is 5y being squared. So that's the sum of two squares. Sum means add. When we did the difference in the previous video, we had a subtraction between these. Recall the difference of two squares. That's an a squared minus a b squared. That's the difference. Difference means subtract. Subtract. Sum means add. So notice this is x squared minus 3 squared. This is x squared minus 2 squared. And this is 4x being squared, subtract 5y being squared. So I'm emphasizing this is the sum, same terms, but this is the sum. That's the difference. That's the difference of two squares. Sum of two squares. So let's multiply these two now. So we can multiply. Can you multiply? Watch me. I did a video on multiplying these fast. Watch. Let's multiply them fast. If you multiply the first two, you get x squared. Multiply the last two, you get a negative 9. And if you add these, you get a 0. So that's the fast way, by multiplying 4. First, done. Last, negative 9. Add these two. So if you multiply these two, you get negative 9. If you add them, you get 0. So that's the short way of doing FOIL. You multiply the first, multiply the last, and you quickly add up these two and put the x in the middle with that number. But in this case, it's a 0. But if you did FOIL, first, outside, inside, last, notice these cancel out, and you get. So if you did FOIL by the long way, which is perfect, you get x squared minus 9. If you did FOIL fast, do FOIL fast here. Multiply x by x, x squared. Multiply plus 2 by minus 2, minus 4. Add these up, you get a 0, so there's no term in the middle. That's quick. But first, outside, inside, last, add 0. So notice these two are the difference of two squares. So this is an x squared minus 3 squared. This one is an x squared minus 2 squared. Notice the middle term in the difference of two squares. The middle term here is a 0. Now, the sum of two squares. This is the sum of two squares. This is the sum of x squared plus 3 squared. That's what we did up here. But notice now, when we have this, we have a product of plus 9. We have no x in the middle, so that means my sum is 0. So this, if I rewrite this, x squared plus 0x plus 9, this trinomial, which the x is put in, has to have a 0 there because it's not up here. So that means in this trinomial, the product is on the end, which is your c, which is 9, and your sum is 0. So if we look at this again, that's your first term, there's no x, and that's your last term. So the product is on the end, plus 9, and the sum is 0. And that's the same that's going to happen here. 4 is 2 squared. So the product is 4, and your sum is 0. So that means if I want to rewrite that, which you don't have to, but I'm just doing it, so that 0x is up right there, but you won't see the x in because it has a 0. And the same thing here, we have a product of what's on the end, which is 25y squared, but the sum is a 0. And so that's a 4 squared plus 5y. So that's a 4x being squared and a 5y. So that's the sum of 2 squares. So the product is on the end, but there's no middle term. There's no xy in the middle. So that means the sum is 0. Hence, the sum of 2 squares, cannot be factored. Cannot be factored over the set of integers. Let's see the sum of 2 squares. Let's try to factor. Let's take x squared plus 9. Try to factor that. Well, here we go. Watch. If you have x squared, you say, well, that's an x and an x. If you have a plus on the end, that means you have 2 pluses or 2 minuses. But the middle term right here is a 0x. So how can you add 2 pluses or 2 minuses? Oh, that's a minus, sorry. How can you have 2 pluses or 2 minuses and have a sum of 0? That's impossible. If you have a sum of 0, that means you must have had a positive in one bracket and a negative in the other. So since the product is positive, I have to have 2 pluses or I have to have 2 minuses. So adding these, I'm going to get a number. So this is impossible. So we cannot factor the sum of 2 squares. Cannot be factored over the set of integers. The sum of 2 squares cannot be factored over the integers. They can be factored, but not yet. It's later on in math. But they can't be factored in grade 9 and grade 10. Probably in grade 11, depends on what math you're doing, or in grade 12. But they can't be factored over the integers. I repeat. Factor each completely over the integers. So that's the difference of 2 squares. So that's an x and an x. Product is negative, so it's going to be plus minus. And to get 25, I have a 5 and a 5, because that's the difference of 2 squares. That's x squared minus 5 squared. So it's the same terms in each bracket with a plus minus, because the sum is 0. Add negative 5 and 5, it gives you 0. 0 in the middle. And this is the sum of 2 squares. Notice that's an x squared plus 5 squared. And can not factor. And I repeat, over the integers. So when you say your teacher says you cannot factor this, you have to put a stipulation over the integers. So what the teachers mean right now in this grade, you can't factor them because you're talking about using the set of integers. But it can be done later in grade 12, probably. Depends what course you're doing, where it is. And descending order perfect, I have to take the 7 out because the 7 is common, GCF. That's x squared minus 4. 7 into 7x squared, x squared. 7 into 28, negative 4. And that's the difference of 2 squares. We can do the difference of 2 squares because that's an x squared minus 2 squared. So that's an x and an x, a plus and a minus because the product is negative 4 with a 2 and a 2. We can do the difference of 2 squares, but we can't do the sum of 2 squares. Factor, descending order, yes. 2 is a GCF, take it out. 2 into 2x squared is x squared. 2 into 18 goes 9. So now we have, oh, that's an x squared plus 3 squared. So that's the sum of 2 squares. So that's it. We cannot go any further with this over the set of integers. Repeat, because you can't factor the sum of two squares. 9 is a square. You can't do it over the integers. So if you're viewing this and you say, oh, I never knew that, ask your teacher. And the teacher will say, you can't do it over the set of integers. We mean integers until we get to the higher grade. And you'll see it when it happens. You'll know when you got to do it. Number 5, is it in descending order? 3 and 1, yes. We have to take out the 3 and we have to take out the x because the smallest exponent is common in the larger ones. 3x into 3x cubed is x squared. 3x into 48 is a negative 16. X divided into x is 1. Again, we've got an x squared and we don't need an x here because we already have 1 when we multiply. And that's the difference of two squares. That's x squared minus 4 squared. And we know that we can do the difference of two squares. X and x, 4 and 4 with a plus and a minus. We can't do, that was a plus, we wouldn't be able to do this step. Number 16, descending order, yes. We have x is common. The smallest exponent is a 3. Take it out. x5 divided by x cubed is x squared. X cubed divided by x cubed is 1. Notice 2 terms here, 2 here. Notice that the sum of two squares, that's x squared plus 1 squared. We cannot do this any further. That's it. That's as far as it can go. Over the set of integers. Number 7, we have a negative in the leading term. Take it out. We have a 5 in each of these as a factor. We do not have an x, so there's the GCF of negative 5. Negative 5 divided by negative 5 is 1, x squared. 49 divided by negative 5 is a negative 9. And again, we have the difference of two squares. What two squares? We have x squared is x and x. We have 9, which is 3 and 3, and it's a plus and a minus because the product is negative 9. Difference of two squares. Number 8, we have a negative in the leading term, so we take the negative out. And we have no other common factor. So there's the negative coming out. So negative divided by negative is a positive, x squared. Negative divided by negative is a positive 64. When you take a negative out, or you think about taking a negative 1, if you want to put a negative 1 there and have that, it's great, but we won't see the 1 there. And because that's the sum of two squares, which is what? X squared plus 8 squared, you cannot factor the sum of two squares over the integers. So that's as far as we can go. So just a review on the difference of two squares as opposed to the sum of two squares. We cannot factor the sum of two squares over the set of integers. Remember that. Ask your teacher. Do more examples. That brings us to the end of this video. And if you like what I'm doing, click the like button and especially click the subscribe button because I have many more videos coming, many more topics to do. I'm only just getting started. So if you're in grade 7 or 8 and you're 9, you're doing algebra, then I will review most of the topics in algebra for you in geometry and trig and everything right up through to grade 12. Total review, but I'm doing it one unit at a time. Click the notification bell because there are many more videos coming. And write a comment if you wish if you're a subscriber. And visit my math website, mathfullyexplained.com. And there you have 3 sections, me, my degrees and teaching experience. Video section tells you about the strategies you're going to use to help you learn your math. And the content section has the units and the number of videos on each unit or topic I'm doing. Black font is what's online right now on the YouTube channel. And the red font is what I will be doing in the near future. So those students who are in grade 9, you can follow my videos right on up through, taking you through step by step of what's happening. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.